With the Dodd-Frank Act and all the rules and regulations that were enabled as of 2007, 2008, it's important to understand our guidelines in the context of ATR, ability to repay. So primary residence and second homes are subject to ATR and ability to repay. And what does that mean? That means that they are subject to an analysis and evaluation in identifying and being able to clearly identify whether a borrower has the ability to repay their loan. The differentiation between that and investment properties is that investment properties are not under the ATR rules and regulations. And that's where guidelines are much more lenient when it relates to our investment programs, our INV programs, where you have limited documentation, income documentation as such, because ATR is not applicable. It's important to understand the philosophy of ATR if you want to understand the guidelines and the boundaries. It's critical in understanding what are characteristics of ability to repay. Ability to repay in our world, in the non-QM world, is quite often provided with other than income documentation. So it's important to understand that there are certain characteristics that one may find to be a viable characteristic in a loan and an attractive part of doing a loan, but that does not apply to ATR. For example, the fact that a loan is 50 LTV does not have anything to do with the borrower's ability to repay. Now, from a logical standpoint, ability to repay was probably going to be based on the borrower's other forms of income, cash flow, other documentation that indicates that, in fact, this borrower has the ability to make their mortgage payments on a go-forward basis, whether they're 50 LTV or 90 LTV. Again, from a lender standpoint, 50 LTV provides an assurance that the borrower is probably not going to allow their property to go into foreclosure. They will probably not be delinquent, but it does not mean that we meet the ATR rules and regulations. We deal with ATR on a daily basis, and the guidelines are created in a manner where ATR is taken into consideration when creating rules and regulations of what's required in a file. In many cases, people don't seem to understand in our business this concept of ATR, and before you get into guidelines, it's critical that you're sensitive to that, especially when it has to do with exceptions. Quite often we see exceptions on loans, and what everyone fails to understand is whether those exceptions jeopardize the concept of ability to repay or not. And the exceptions have to be countered with compensating factors that do provide an alternative solution to satisfying the ATR rules. So please take that into consideration in our current and future guidelines when evaluating exceptions, when evaluating conditions and boundaries of our guidelines and our exception process.